right, class, this is lecture number 15. Last time we were together, we were talking about a lot of things to include that of Thomas Jefferson. We spent almost 2 lectures with Thomas Jefferson and the Republicans, so we need to move on, but we still have a little bit to go before we get through with this section. We also talked about Marbury versus Madison, established the precedence of judiciary review. And I mentioned too bad John Marshall, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, brought the Supreme Court up to the same level as the executive branch and also the legislative branches too. Somewhere through here, I think we mentioned 1803, the purchase of the Louisiana Territory, which is called the Louisiana Purchase, the explorations of Lewis and Clark, use of the Corps of Discovery, which was a keel boat. You should recognize their Indian guide, the 16-year-old Shoshone Indian guide. Her name was Sacagawea, or Sacagawea. Several different pronunciations on that. And somewhere through here, we casually mentioned Zebulon Pike, Pike's Peak, which is named for him. And we closed out the class period talking about this famous duel that took place 11th of July in 1804 when Alexander Hamilton was shot by Aaron Burr. All right, so anyway, let's continue on with Aaron Burr for a second. And Aaron Burr is going to disappear from the country for a period of time. Then he'll return. And I have to tell you, I'm not really sure what Aaron Burr was up to at this time. Apparently, he was trying to assemble an army, and an army of maybe 100, something like that, at Blennerhassett Island. That's an island that's present in the middle of the Ohio River. And nevertheless, here, we don't know what he was up to. He was reported to have made a statement, Mexico glitters in all of our eyes, declaring himself as an emperor. And like I said, we really don't know what he was going to do, whether he was going to try to take over the Louisiana Territory, take his army down to Mexico and take over that area. I don't know. But nonetheless here, a person that he had confided in, who was the governor of the Louisiana Territory, actually sent a message to the president, Thomas Jefferson, that Aaron Burr was up to no good, and he had this army that he was organizing. Remember, this was the Vice President of the United States. So anyway, arrest warrants were placed for Aaron Burr, and Aaron Burr was taken into custody down in the area here where Alabama is located today here, folks, down near Mobile. I was trying to find a likeness here of Aaron Burr, and I believe I have one here if we go back to my camera here. And that's Aaron Burr there. That's what he appeared as, in about midlife anyway, a very ambitious individual. Aaron Burr lived to the age of, I believe it was 73. And he was married to his old mistress, Betsy Jummel, and she divorced him. I think Aaron Burr was 73 and she was 70 at that time, and she divorced him on charges of, accused him of adultery with that. And Aaron Burr today is buried in Princeton. You may visit his burial site if you wish to do so. All right, I'm going to go back to myself here, and let's get started in this next section. We have a lot of ground to cover on this too, folks. It's a big, big section. We are on our way to war. This war is known as the War of 1812. Let me kind of give you a preface on this too. For the United States, we had the finest merchant navy in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, when I say merchant navy, I'm not talking about the warring navy like the United States Navy. This is a navy, merchant navy, that transports goods across the ocean. And for the British had a very fine military navy. This was a Royal Navy. But life in a Royal Navy was not very good, and it was hard to get recruits. There was flogging that takes place on these British ships. It was poor pay there. In fact, the British sailors referred to it as hell ships. And so to compensate for this, what the British were doing, they were stopping American ships on the high seas, and they were just impressing our sailors. And what I mean by impressing, they were just taking U.S. merchant sailors into their service. And, of course, this is just not the proper thing to do. A lot of these British Royal Navy sailors were deserting when the British ships would land at American ports. So let me go back to my camera here, and let's see if we can make that a little bit more appeasing to your eyes here. And the term I used a few minutes ago was impressment. And an event's going to take place in June of 1807. And let's see, I wrote the dates here for you. And it involves 2 ships. Now, this first ship here, which is the Chesapeake, this is the American ship. This was the American ship, the Chesapeake, and the British ship here, which was a heavily armed ship, which was called the Leopard. And the commander of the Leopard suspected that there were some that there were some deserting British soldiers that were present on the Chesapeake. And as it turned out, this was true. In fact, on board the Leopard, you could actually see these sailors that had deserted out of the British Navy here. And so when the Chesapeake set sail, leaving out of Newport, Virginia anyway, it had barely cleared into open waters when the Leopard pounced upon it. And we can see in this likeness here, I'm going to thrust this under the camera here, and this is the engagement that took place between Chesapeake and the Leopard there. And nevertheless here we'll find that the Chesapeake tried to make a run for it, but they were unsuccessful with doing this, and the British and the Leopard began to fire shots into the Chesapeake, and finally the Chesapeake, took down its sails and dropped its anchor with that. The British went aboard, they took those 4 deserters away, and subsequently hanged one, and President Jefferson reacted to this and demanded that those sailors be returned. 3 of those were returned, 1 was not because he was already hanged. As a result of that, President Jefferson will enact what is called the Embargo Act. I don't really understand this completely here, folks. This placed United States merchants, it placed off limits any foreign ports to them. So, in my estimation, it looks like the United States really gets hurt with this. All right, so let's take a little side view here. And Thomas Jefferson served as president for 8 years, and customarily you do not run for a 3rd term in office. So for the Republicans, and I didn't identify this, the Republicans ran their candidate, James Madison. The Federalists ran their candidate, our old friend, Charles Cotesworth Pinckney, and the results ended up being 122 electoral votes for James Madison and 47 for Charles Cotesworth Pinckney. All right, so anyway, and that's our election results there. Here it is. I wrote it a second time, apparently, here. And yes, I did not see that the first time. All right, I want to share some likenesses here. And I'm going to go back to myself for just a jiffy here, folks. This is a likeness, which is a portrait of James Madison. I don't think that's too flattering to him. He reminds me of the Crypt Master, if you know who I'm talking about with that, A very small individual. I think he was 5'4", weighed 100 pounds. Let's go back to my camera here, and I'll share some additional photographs here with James Madison. And you have some in your textbook if you're following your textbook, somewhere around page 205. That's a much better portrait of James Madison. Here's his wife, which is Dolly Madison. Dolly Madison served as White House hostess under Thomas Jefferson, and you can see a less flattering likeness of her in your textbook. All right, let's move on here now. Where the Madisons lived, they lived on Pillier. Now, this is present in Virginia. It is open to the public. You'll have to buy a ticket to go there. It's kind of an interesting place to visit if you're curious about that. Here's a close-up view of it. And if you look over as I'm looking at it, it would be over to your right there. There's a forested area, and I'll get back to that in just a second. Here's a pamphlet there that shows you Montpelier, shows you how to spell it if you care about that anyway. Not too terribly far from where Monticello is located. Probably do both of those in a day. And if you take this road, which was down to the right that I was telling you about through the trees there, you can actually go into the cemetery and see the burial sites there of James Madison and Dolly Madison. There's a short walk through the trail that will lead to the house, and you can actually walk on the grounds of the house without buying a ticket with that, but you cannot go into the house, without a ticket. All right, so anyway, that was out there of James Madison. Okay, now 3 interesting individuals are going to emerge during this period of time. And one of these individuals is an American. Of course, all these people are American, whether they're Native American, or whether they are white Americans of British descent. But one individual, his name is William Henry Harrison. I do not have a likeness of William Henry Harrison, but he was the governor of the Indiana Territory. And if you travel up to Vincennes, Indiana, you can actually go by the home there of William Henry Harrison. It's known as Grouse Land. I think it is open to the public. When I was there and took this photograph, it was not open to the public, but you can walk up and look in the windows without any charge whatsoever. Here's a historical sign that's right outside the home there, showing you how to spell the name of the house there, which is Grouseland. And anyway, so he was the governor of the Louisiana Territory, governor of the Indiana Territory, and he was given the mission from Thomas Jefferson, before Thomas Jefferson went out of office there, to resolve this Indian problem. And for Thomas Jefferson, the solution to the Indian problem was for Native Americans to convert to settle farmers and develop the ways of white people. And if you don't want to do that, move west of the Mississippi River. It's just very simple choices with that. And William Henry Harrison would use everything at his disposal there through bribes and trickery and agreements, treaties with the Indians to get the Indians to depart from that area here. All right, now there are two other, let me see here, I lost my train of thought with that here. And there are two other individuals. Let's see where we are here. And these are Native Americans. And one of these individuals is named Tecumseh, and that's the way you want to pronounce his name, Tecumseh. Sometimes referred to as the shooting star, the chief of the Shawnees. And he had his his older brother here. And a little bit tricky here on the spelling with this, and a little bit tricky on the pronunciation. And you hear this pronounced several different ways. But listen to it, look at the word as they pronounce it, Tenskwatawa. He was the prophet. He was the prophet. All right, now I'm going to share likenesses with you of both of those individuals here. And these are Shawnee Indians. This is Tecumseh here, a very, very eloquent speaker, a dynamic leader, as a matter of fact. And then we had the older brother here to Tecumseh, who is Tenskwatawa, and this is Tenskwatawa right here. Two very, very different brothers. And they lived at a place which was at the confluence of the Wabash and the Wildcat River. And where those two rivers come together, this creates the Wabash River. So it's Tippecanoe River and the Wildcat River, and when they come together, it creates the Wabash River. Rather large rivers, matter of fact, with that too. But for this individual, Tenskwatawa, he was referred to as the prophet. He's like a medicine man here. And, of course, these are the two leaders. And for Tecumseh would wow all the Indians, with his his brilliance and with his oratorical skills with that. And the two brothers would work quite well together here. And I'm going to share a quotation here with you from Tecumseh. And he was speaking to William Henry Harrison and the Native Americans. The Great Spirit gave this great island to his red children. He placed the whites on the other side of the big water. They were not content with their own, but they came to take ours from us. They have driven us from the sea to the lakes, and we can go no further. This was Tecumseh to William Henry Harrison. All right, now the interesting thing here about Tenskwatawa was nothing more than just a fat, drunken, one-eyed Indian. He had lost one of his eyes. It was gouged out in a drunken fight. And he was known for his just his drunkenness there. And he was kind of the oldest camel, of Mayberry, if you understand who I'm talking about with that. And then strangely one day, Tenskwatawa died. And when he died, they were preparing him for his burial or to lay him to rest. And crazily enough, the deceased Tenskwatawa, as they were carrying him to the burial site, his one eye fluttered open and he was mysteriously returned to life. And he claimed he'd been to see the Master of Light, and it had cured his alcoholism. And he never would drink again. And the Indians were just completely amazed with this, how this pathetic drunk could just walk away from the bottle and just be completely sober. And so Tenskwatawa and Tecumseh would work together. And like I said, Tecumseh would all the Indians with his oratorical skills, and then Tenskwatawa would perform some magic feats, something like that. And on one occasion, William Henry Harrison told Tenskwatawa, he said, so you really think you're a prophet, that you can perform miracles? And he said, I want to see you perform a miracle. And Tenskwatawa said, all in due time. And he waited for a few days, and he summoned the Indians there at Prophetstown. And when the Indians came out and gathered around him, the Shawnee gathered around him, Tenskwatawa said, "And now I will make the sun disappear." And he waved his arm through the skies here, and gradually the sun disappeared, and it frightened the Indians very, very much. And so they were begging Tenskwatawa, "Please make the sun return." And Tenskwatawa said, "I will make it return in good time." And after about 5 minutes or something like that, he waved his arm through the sky, and slowly the sun began to reappear. And he was indeed a medicine man. He was indeed capable of performing miracles. He is a prophet. I think you all know what actually took place with that. Now, for Tecumseh went south. And what he was trying to do was to unify the Indians in present-day Alabama. So he was in the southern parts of Alabama trying to rally the Indians together, the Native Americans together. And he was very powerful to them. And they did not want him to leave. And he told the Native Americans in Alabama, he said, "I'm going back to Prophetstown, which is located between the confluence of the Tippecanoe and the Wildcat River at Prophetstown anyway." And the Indians in Alabama said, "Well, how will we know when you've returned safely, up to Indiana?" And Tecumseh said, "Well, when I arrive back at Prophetstown, I will stomp my shoe so loudly, stomp my foot so loudly that it will shake your huts here in Alabama." And do you know something? It actually did take place. There was an earthquake that took place in the year 1811 on the Mississippi River and rerouted the Mississippi River for 3 days. It changed the course of the river. Today you can find that area is located up at Reelfoot Lake. And that was a lake that was created from that earthquake here. All right, back we go here. So that's the way of life that we have in that period of time. Now, when Tecumseh was in the South, William Henry Harrison, and here I've tried to draw this. I'm sorry to interrupt myself, but I penciled this in for you here, and I'm reading upside down, so I can't really tell here. Here's the Wildcat River. It's coming in like this. This is in Indiana, and we have the Tippecanoe River, which is here, and here's the Wabash River that's formed from them, and where Prophetstown was located was right here. All right, so I want to move on here, and let's go to this date here. And while Tecumseh was gone, William Henry Harrison assembled a military force of about 1,000, and he provoked an attack here at Prophetstown. Today we give it the name, we call it the Battle of Tippecanoe, because that's the river that was fought upon November the 7th, 1811, and the Indians there were defeated at that Battle of Tippecanoe. Today, when you visit there, I'm going to share some things with you today when you visit there. And I don't really recommend that you make a special trip to go to that battle site at Tippecanoe. It is an Indiana State Park today. But you can read the article here if you were in the classroom, Showdown at Tippecanoe. If you visit there, not much to this in the way of the battle itself. A couple of historical markers. And you can see a marker here that marks the Battle of Tippecanoe. To the victor goes the spoils, and you see on the monument right here, it's not Tecumseh, it's not Tenskwatawa, but the individual on the monument is William Henry Harrison. He will pick up the sobriquet, he'll pick up the nickname, Old Tippecanoe, Old Tippecanoe. And by the way, if you happen to be in Vincennes, Indiana, there is a carved structure there of Tecumseh. So a lot of history associated with that area there. Alrighty, so anyway, that's that for that. Okay, now, some Americans that were down in the area of Louisiana attacked, this was in 1811, attacked the French stronghold at Baton Rouge. And if you translate this word Baton Rouge, that's rouge, of course, means red. Baton, of course, means stick, so that is a red stick here. And they took it. And then they looked towards, some of these individuals looked towards for Florida and realized, and Florida was controlled by Spain. Baton Rouge is actually controlled by Spain. It had been formerly controlled by the French. And, if the United States declared war on England, then we could use this as an excuse to go in and annex Florida. All right, so here we go here. In the 1810 congressional elections, two individuals were elected to Congress here, both in the House of Representatives. Both these individuals were war hawks. If you know what I'm talking about, war hawks, these are people that promote war. And one of the individuals here, and you need to recognize his name, was Henry Clay, Kentucky's finest son. I have great admiration for Henry Clay, and I love lecturing about him. Henry Clay, I think, was 32 years of age, and his counterpart here was from South Carolina. And I like lecturing about John Caldwell Calhoun, 28 years of age, Calhoun Community College named after him. You know, Calhoun, many places are named after Calhoun. A very, very noteworthy person from South Carolina. Both these individuals, by the way, were slave owners, and we may address that at a different time here. And anyway, in 1811, that's 1 year after Henry Clay was chosen as a member of the House of Representatives, he was chosen as Speaker of the House, which is very, very powerful. And both of those individuals were pushing for war with Great Britain. And sure enough, it was put to a vote, and in the House of Representatives, that vote was 79 to 49, and in the Senate, the vote was 19 to 13. Not a single Federalist voted in favor of going to war, but nevertheless, we did get a declaration of war. And I'll tell you that President Madison wasn't too eager for a war. What we refer to this as the War of 1812. The War of 1812. Now, at first, the British were not even interested in going to war. The British were wrapped up in the Napoleonic Wars, which were taking place in Europe at that time, and they really just didn't have the resources to focus over on this war with upstart America. But when Napoleon began to fall into defeat in 1813, the British could now lay their focus, make their focus here more diligent over here in the Americans against America in this War of 1812. It might help you if you follow in the map. Following on the map in your textbook, which is on page, I think it's on 209 in your textbook here, and I don't want to take my eyes away from the camera here to confirm that. But you can follow along with that. And I'll tell you, for the first parts of the war, for the Americans, we didn't do very well. We ended up invading Canada. We invaded Canada up through the area which is where Detroit is located today, and crossed over to the other side there of the lake, and Lake Erie, and made our way up into Canada, and we just didn't do very well. We got our noses bloodied there. We were pushed back into Fort Detroit, and that fort was surrendered here with practically no fighting. We also didn't do very well at Fort Dearborn, which is located in Chicago, and the British were able to take our surrender there. They moved north to Fort Michilimackinac and took the American force there, and we just were not doing very well whatsoever, and we had started this war. On the high seas, we were doing much better, and particularly we were making use of a ship here, and I'll just put it up like this so I won't have to shift the camera around. It's a ship which is known as USS Constitution. Old Ironsides is what it is known as. It is still in existence today and in the inventory of the United States Navy. This is located in Boston, and you can actually go on that ship if you wish to do so. The crew on the ship, U.S. Navy sailors, they're dressed in period attire for the most part here, and they put this to sail and actually take it out into the harbor there periodically. After a short period of time, the British placed a naval blockade around the port cities in America, so our Navy became largely ineffective there on the waters. We had another engagement to take place, and I think I have this written out for you, and I'll show it to you in a few minutes here, which took place up at Lake Erie, and Oliver Hazard Perry won a stunning victory here at what was called Put-in Bay. If you're using the map in your textbook, you can see where I'm talking about. And Put-in Bay, we have met the enemy, and they are ours here. And of course, this took place in Lake Erie, and you can just, as you sail by on Lake Erie, you just have to say, well, the battle took place somewhere close by, whatever. All right, so anyway, let's move on here, and I'm going to go back to my camera. And all right, just to kind of catch you up a little bit, these are some of the things that I mentioned to you a second ago. USS Constitution here, Old Ironsides, Oliver Hazard Perry. That may be one of your examination questions there for both of those anyway. Okay, so let's start turning the war around a little bit, and I think I'll just leave my camera in this position for the time being here. And we'll find that William Henry Harrison in 1813 will once again invade Canada. And when he does so, he has a large American army with him and will engage with the British in what was called the Battle of the Thames. Let's see if I wrote it out. I did write it out for you. The Battle of the Thames. And the United States recorded a victory here. So we did quite well with that. And kind of interesting here at this battle, here, I'm sorry, I'm on something here. But at this battle, at the Battle of the Thames, Tecumseh, who was serving as a brigadier, that's like a one-star general in the British Army, Tecumseh was killed. He was killed by an American congressman, Richard Johnson. And how about that? I mean, I cannot imagine a congressman today taking up a weapon and going off to war. It's just, maybe they would, but that just kind of surprises me that they would. All right, so anyway, and it was also during this period of time that we, under General Dearborn, we actually went into the area where the Canadian capital was. At that time, it was called York. Today, it's referred to as Toronto. And anyway, and we burned the capital there. We burned the Canadian capital, you know. I think you folks all know what revenge is, right? Well, then we'll wait and see what revenge is like. All right, now, I want to go to the south here. And in the south, I'm talking about in the areas where Alabama is located. And there was a problem there with the Native Americans. Remember, Tecumseh had been there earlier. And anyway, the Indians were causing a problem down in the areas of Alabama. Now, we organized these Indians into two groups. I did not write this down for you anyway. One group of Indians, which are called Red Sticks, and these Red Sticks are not friendly to white Americans in this area here. You had such Red Stick leaders here as that of Minowa and Red Eagle, who was also known as William Weatherford. He was a mixed race. I think he was Creek Indian and he was English. And Jim Boy happened to be another one. And then we had the friendly Indians, which were referred to as the White Sticks. Now, if we take ourselves down in southern parts of Alabama, down into Baldwin County, there was a fort that was constructed, and I'm going to go back here to this and let you see the name of the fort, and this fort which was known as Fort Mims. All right, now take yourself to the date here, 30th of August, 1813. I don't hold you responsible for dates, and I want to find something here. And let me cover this so this will not be a detractor to you. And at Fort Mims, there were a lot of people, a lot of farmers that were out in the nearby community that had their families with them. But the Red Sticks under Red Eagle, William Weatherford, had been such a threat to them that what these farmers would do is during the nighttime hours, they would go inside the security here of Fort Mims. And that's where they would spend the night there. And they had guards that would be posted out here on the walls here that would alert anyone, you know, if there was any Red Stick presence there. And there was also a gate, and this is the gate right here, that you could swing closed at night to provide security. But this is Baldwin County. There's a lot of sand that is present there. And it went for several weeks, and there was no Indian sightings whatsoever. So these individuals here became somewhat lax and lazy, and it was just so much trouble to have to close that gate at night that they started leaving the gate open. You have the sentries there on each corner there that can alert you if any of the Indian presence is there. But this is a sandy soil, and when we have rain to take place, this allowed, and people didn't notice it, it allowed sand to accumulate down at the bottom of the gate. So sure enough, on that date I mentioned to you a few seconds ago, the Indians under Red Eagle, William Weatherford, approached the fort, and then the alarm was sounded, and when the alarm was sounded, the people inside ran out and made an attempt to close the gate, and they could not get the gate closed. So this meant that the Indians and Native Americans just poured into the fort there, and they killed the majority of the inhabitants there. One slave, her name was Hester, actually escaped and went down to the nearby Alabama River and found a canoe there and got in a canoe and went down the Alabama River, and she was one of the ones that survived and actually reported what had taken place up at Fort Mims. Let me see if I can find some photographs here of this, and I'll share this first one with you. If you're down in the area of Fort Mims, and it's kind of an interesting place to visit. You can see some historical markers, excuse me, historical markers here with the Red Eagle, William Weatherford here, and you can see a little monument here dedicated to Red Eagle likewise. There's not much that's present there in the fort unless they have improved it in the past couple of years. I think one wall of the fort has been rebuilt, and I'm showing that to you here. And most of the fort, you can just see kind of the elevated where the redoubts were at one point. But, if you're down in the area, make a pass through that, it's probably in an area of Alabama you've never been before, because most people don't go there because it is off the beaten path. All right, now I want to tell you about another situation that takes place here. And this involved, let's go back to a man by the name of Andrew Jackson. And Andrew Jackson was a frontier aristocrat. He was a wealthy individual, a lawyer, later president of the United States. But he was a two-star general, a major general in Tennessee militia. And he was given the mission to go down into the area where Alabama is located. And Alabama, of course, was not a state at that time. And to resolve this Indian problem. And sure enough, he did. Andrew Jackson left the area of Nashville, had a large army with him, began to move south, went into Alabama. I don't have enough time here to explain this in the way in which I wish I could. If you were in my classroom, I would give you much greater detail on this. But their indications are that part of his army actually went through Walker County in the area of Sipsey, where the Mulberry Fork and the Sipsey Fork actually come together. You have a little boat slip there, and a little fishing shop there, but that's supposedly where old Warrior Town was present there, where these Native Americans were, where some of them were anyway. And that old Warrior Town was burned by some of the followers of Andrew Jackson, not necessarily Andrew Jackson, but they continued and went down further into Alabama. If you're on Highway 280 going to Auburn, you'll pass kind of close to this. But let me show you what I'm talking about with this. And do I have this position right for you folks? And looks like I do here. And here's what the Indians, the way in which they positioned themselves. Now, the Indians were under the leadership of, and they were Creek Indians, they were being led by Minowa. Now, Minowa was a red stick. Now, if you look at the river here, and this is the Tallapoosa River. It's not very far across. Even if you were probably just a modest swimmer, you could swim across that. I don't know how deep it is. Never swam that myself, but I don't think it is too deep. And what Minowa and the Creek Indians did, they positioned themselves back in a little bend here of the river. So if you look at it, it kind of looks like a horseshoe. And they constructed a fortified barrier here across this area, such as that. Visit the site today if you wish to do so. And here came Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was coming in this direction here. Had a 3-pound cannon, 6-pound cannon. And the other group, this was a group that came through Walker County here, was under a Colonel Coffee, later General Coffee. And Jackson sent him around to the backside, such as that. Now, what Minowa planned to do is that if the Americans broke through here, all the Creek Indians and the females and the children would all run back here to this side where they had positioned canoes, dugouts, and then they would use the dugouts to escape over to the other side. But when Colonel Coffee went to this side, he had with him white sticks, and they saw the canoes, the dugouts over on this side, and so they swam across and got the dugouts and took the dugouts back over to this side. So when Jackson actually broke through here, there was no place for the Native Americans to go, the Creek Indians to go, except back to the Tallapoosa, and then they had to swim to the other side. And over on the other side was Colonel Coffee's American soldiers there. And I just put it very bluntly there, it was just target practice. And Minowa himself was shot 7 times. He survived this, but this just literally put an end to the fighting for the Creek Indians. It broke their bows with that. Now that is referred to as the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. All right, I'm going to go back. I'm sorry to switch this back and forth, but I did not give you a date on that. So let's see here. And we'll go into the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. Oops, things are moving around on me right here. And there we go, Battle of Horseshoe Bend. Takes place on March 27th, 1814. If you good folks are traveling down toward Auburn. You go through the area there of Dadeville. You'll see the historical signs there, and if you'll get off the beaten path, go about 12 miles, something like that, you can go to Horseshoe Bend site. It's pretty nice. It is. Okay, so now the British came up with a plan in which it was actually a three-pronged plan here. And what they were going to do was launch an attack here down the Hudson River. The Americans defeated that. The second plan was to invade Washington, D.C., and the third plan was to invade Baltimore. Did I write that down? I did not write. Baltimore was the third part. Okay, so let's carry ourselves to Washington, D.C. I'm going to go back here to my camera here. We're running a little bit short of time here, folks, so I'm going to have to move on with this a little bit. And let me find my map here of Washington, D.C., and we'll use this the best I can anyway, and try to move my microphone a little bit closer so you can hear me. And what the British did, the British had their soldiers that were mounted or that were placed on ships, and they moved up the Hudson River, up the Potomac River, such as that. But the Potomac River, there had been chains and barriers had been placed across it. So what the British did, they went up the Tecumseh River to about this location, and then went overland to Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. was just a little hamlet at that time, and it was lightly defended. And for James Madison, the President of the United States, he actually went out and tried to get on the front lines, and very, very wisely, he was hustled away with that. But the British went into Washington, D.C., burned the White House, and went up to the Capitol, went into the Capitol there, and burned the Treasury building, several other buildings there. But what saved the day was an approaching storm, and as the storm approached, then the British actually left and went back to where their ships were and sailed away. And the next thing they were going to do, and this was about 3 weeks later, was to go into where Baltimore is, and let me try to share this with you too. And Baltimore was guarded by Fort McHenry, and I've lost my pencil here. Sorry, I was trying to point this out to you. And where the British came in, they came in like this up the Patapsco River, a very polluted area. And they were going to go up through where the inner harbor is and actually enter into Baltimore itself. Now, Baltimore at that time was about the size of where I made this red spot. And so they went in there, and the inner harbor was barricaded. I'm going to try to show this to you and let you see what it looks like here. And maybe we can envision this a little bit, and I'm not getting a very good contrast with this, but this is what Fort McHenry looked like. Fort McHenry. Baltimore is behind me. Baltimore will be behind me, and where the British are, and I'm trying to get the contrast right here, the British were out here. The British were out in that area here. So the British could not actually make their way into Baltimore. And so what they decided to do is that they would knock this fortress out, which was Fort McHenry. I'm trying to find a likeness of it here. And this is what it looks like here, having to work in reverse here. But Baltimore is back in this direction right here. And what these Americans did, they had sunk some ships out here so that it was impassable. You could not get through. And so what the British decided to do was just shell this fort into submission. And what they were using these tremendous cannonballs. And these cannonballs, which were, I don't know, this size right here, they weighed 200 pounds easily. And they were placing these cannonballs into these mortars, and I'm not doing very well with this. They were putting them into these mortars, such as what you're seeing right here. And it was firing these cannonballs up over the fort. And the British were also using these rockets, such as this, these concrete rockets. And let me see if I can find it here, such as that. And it's like a huge, what do we call those? You know what I'm talking about with that. It has a little explosive powder on the end and a long stick with it, and you light that, and it whooshes out. You know what I'm talking about. So anyway, what happens here, we had these rockets that were bursting in air, and these rockets had the bombs bursting in air, and the rockets that had their red glare. And on board one of these British ships, there was a young man, he was an attorney trying to get the release of one of his clients here. And I'm going to go back to this here. And anyway, he was trying to get the release of one of his clients who was present on one of the British ships. And he came out on the deck of the ship here and looked at Fort Henry. Here's the way you spell Fort McHenry. And he reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, and he wrote out a poem. And his poem goes, "Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight over the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave over the land of the free and the home of the brave?" Here, we all know that song. We've heard it very many times here. It was actually placed to the tune of a British beer-drinking song, and in 1931 it became the national anthem. All right, and I hope we keep that. There are people that are trying to remove that, as our national anthem. All right, folks, I did not quite get through this battle, get through this war of 1812. We got a short battle to talk about the next time we get together, and we're going to move on to other things, other topics here. All right, thank you very much.